ladies and gentlemen, dear Laura, it is an absolute pleasure to be given the first keynote speech today at this year's celebration of 30 years of the right of the child. Here in beautiful yet rainy London today. Thank you, Laura. I hope you recover well. I myself feel really run down, so I feel you. I will address today a few key topics which are all in their own rights address an angle on children's rights in some way or another. I will be talking about online bullying and trolls, as well as the impact of conflict on the child and his and her education. And lastly, I will talk about two of my many projects and how I personally try to make this world a better place by showcasing some examples of Professors Without Borders and Montessori International. Education can determine attitudes, values, and behaviors across generations, quoted by the UK Council for Education. The rights of children matter hugely. They are the future of our communities, our workforce, our humanity. Each one, good and bad experiences, will affect the child and will have long-term consequences on their physical and psychological health. Hence, let me start with my first brief topic. I choose the topic of security and how security and the feeling of being safe will influence the life of a child in his or her human rights and upbringing. I personally have grown up in a relatively safe and supportive environment. This is definitely not the norm for everyone. As I travel around the world for my different projects, I was in the military for 6 years, was in the Kosovo, as you heard, my consultancy and so on. I'm often faced with the harsh and heartbreaking reality young children and young adolescents face every day. We're living in a time of intense transformation and innovation, and that's good. While we're also living in times of great separation and conflict. The so-called connected world through technology is in reality, I believe, morally and ethically more divided than ever before. Topics such as cybersecurity and online trolling is a topic which I would argue every child needs to deal with nowadays. As a mother of 2 teenagers who are born into a royal family, an environment which is very sheltered and safe, I can assure you that no matter in which family you are born, the reality of peer pressure and online bullying is very much alive for all of them. I'm always wondering if the right of a child should reinforce more actively the protection from cyberbullying by introducing more regulation and impose limitations on online bullying and online content. I would love to see more educational awareness campaigns on the power of the word. UNICEF Canada surely agrees with me when addressing Article 19 of the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child and states that recognizing the link between cyberbullying and children's rights, including the right to protection from harm, as well as other interrelated rights in the Convention, provides the critical perspective necessary to formulate effective responses. The problem with cyberbullying is that it is invisible to us parents, to us teachers. My own son Gabriel was bullied for a while at school when he was young. And it took me some time, to be honest, to realize that, because he was very quiet about it. He was hiding it. However, when he changed his behavior and didn't want to, for example, have his good night story in the evening anymore, but rather wanted to be by himself, I knew there was something wrong. However, that, in my opinion, is when you find out as a parent and or a teacher that it has happened, it's already almost too late, because damage of self-esteem has occurred. He's luckily fine today and has recovered from this situation, as I made sure he's equipped psychologically and physically with the tools he needs to protect himself. However, not every child has this luck to have such an engaged parent. Not because the parent doesn't want to support his or her child, but because sometimes, especially in developing countries, the parents work as well as the children. I will elaborate on that a little bit later. Hence, for this section, one would agree that with cybersecurity is a unique phenomenon, a silent perpetrator, and children are, and children are at most risk and need to be protected. UNICEF mentioned as well another aspect of cyberbullying and its effect on the child, which I found very interesting. Cyberbullying has quite a lot of health risks, such as headaches, dizziness, stomach pains, etc., while also having psychological implications on the mood and character of the child in question. I think we all agree on that as well, right? When we're on social media, when we see other friends, our friends that we introduce to some friends hanging out and they don't tell us, right? Just stupid things like that. And children are more exposed to that. So for all educators in the room and policymakers, it is crucial to address this sleeping cell from its core by involving the children into the policy drafting from an early age on. As we said, do we agree that some governments are very remote to what a child actually needs? Because they say it's just children, right? So only when children understand as well, by including them, that their freedom of expression is not hindered, while understanding what cyberbullying actually is and what it can do to their peers when present, it helps to certain understanding for our youth while giving policymakers an opportunity to look into the psyche of our children, understand and adapt the regulation and limitation with the children to address the issue constructively and effectively. This brings me to my next point. While we're having issues with cyberbullying, meaning around 4 out of children have thought about suicide starting at the age of 10 due to low self-esteem, depression, and bullying, I would argue this is mostly a Western and Asian epidemic, while, as in developing countries, they face something very different: conflict. Conflict is all over the world, and we read about it in the news. We cannot imagine how it feels like to be a parent or a child experiencing this firsthand on a daily basis. Even my military experience cannot meet this experience. Conflict has huge implications on the right of a child. There are enormous amount of people who are forced displaced due to that. I strongly argue that conflict and the right of a child are pressing topics which needs to be addressed and dealt with hand in hand. Conflict has significant impact on the future of a child, and it affects all domains. I will look into education for the purpose of this keynote now. Conflict has a worrying negative effect on education. In conflict, often the ones suffering the most are children. They lose their parents, they lose their homes, they don't grow up in a safe environment where they can play, which we'll hear later about. Arguably a very important social skill that a child needs to learn while growing up. Health and the access to quality medical facilities and education, of course. Hence, education is an essential element of human development. Everything we are, everything we do, everything we have created day by day is because of education. The learning of soft skills, motor skills, work-specific skills, perspectives on lives, who we are, who we not are, and often inherited, transmitted through family generations. The being of what am I really? So kind of like the us versus them. I take Kosovo as an example. I was a UN peacekeeper there, and I learned the hard way that there's a conflict and there is a human memory of conflicts where time does not really play a role. Generations over generations, retorics of the us versus them is inflicted on young children from the moment that they are born. Hence, education is the key to empower youth. As outlined in the UN resolution on the right of a child, they stated, I quote, "Profoundly concerned with the situation of children in many parts of the world remains critical. In an increasingly globalized environment, as a result of the persistence of poverty, social inequality, inadequate social and economic conditions, pandemics, in particular HIV/AIDS, malaria, tuberculosis, non-commercial diseases, lack of drinking water, disasters, armed conflict, foreign occupation, climate change, natural disaster, violence, terrorism, abuse, neglect, hunger, racism, and many, many other things." Hearing this, the topic of education comes up in my head in all domains. It is there to empower, and it's the only tool to empower best. Education teaches youth to respect one another, respect nature, respect their constitutions and governments, become better leaders to replace corrupt leaders and representatives, empower communities, create new jobs, reinforce the social cohesion, and lift up people out of poverty due to this. Education is and remains, in my opinion, one of the strongest tools of change in the world. If a woman is neglected and deprived of her own human rights, one puts a whole community at risk. But if one educates a woman, you empower a whole community and generation. Hence, gender equality is also often something, a big issue, which needs to be addressed when talking about the right of the child and gender equality. This brings me to my last point, my own work. I have created an educational non-governmental body, Professors Without Borders, which I launched 4 years ago. We work in Sierra Leone, Uganda, Senegal, Thailand, India, and so on. So it, as you said, Laura, it tries to reverse the brain drain. When you educate youth, crime goes down. I have seen firsthand in the countries that I'm working with that when students come to school in their holidays, because that's what we do, we give them summer schools, they are less prone to be violent, and they are also less prone, well, they are more educated in the way that you give them the soft skill they need in order to respect one another more. I know that educating every child in the world will take time. However, we need to start somewhere, right? The effects it will have on the world will be huge. Just imagine all the displaced refugees. Children living under disastrous conditions in refugee camps, often unsafe, violent, bad containers, lack of basics and lack of education. These are ticking time bombs. Not only do we, by looking away, infringe on their human rights, but also do we create future frustrated, violent and unpredictable, broken human beings who will be hard to control. Look already today at the prisons and how they fill up. We keep building prisons, while the reality is right in front of us, taking it by the core. When young kids are still kids, and when we do have an opportunity to support them to become educated, happy and hardworking adults, why don't we? From nothing comes nothing, as I always say to my kids. I think this is also why we are here today, to link the power of education to the rights of a child. They do go hand in hand and cannot be addressed separately. Montessori education is another one of my educational projects. This is actually how Laura and I met in the first place, in Abu Dhabi, when she gave a presentation and I was signing an MOU between Montessori and HCT. What I love about Montessori is that it addresses not only the educational need of a child, it also enhances the learning experience and fosters each and every child's skill and provide an opportunity for students to open their own Montessori schools. It is truly revolutionary in my opinion. It's a great model to be used in conflict zones where mothers could learn the Montessori curriculum and empower themselves and their families by creating their own schools. This does not only benefit the child, but it also benefits the community, the country, and fosters the search of a more stable, regulated, informed, and supportive environment. After the rights of children matter and need to be considered at all times, in all walks of life, in all domains, our leaders need to start thinking long-term instead of their short-term personal interests. And we see it in the politics, right, don't we? Our leaders, well, the policies need to be reinforced, as with the example of conflict. Existing policies need to be revisited and adjusted at all times. And policies and other policies need to be drafted, as with the example of cyberbullying, to address the change in our societies. There is still much to be done, much to be considered, much to be celebrated. Let's invest today in the future of our children of tomorrow by actively involving our unique skills set to the UN Convention on the Rights of a Child. I will sadly need to leave after my keynote now, but as you can see, there's my hashtag, and also just write me your details. I would love to hear from you and all the work you do, because I think only together, by connecting and really communicating on how we can do something together, change is possible. Thank you very much for your attention. I wish you all a thought-provoking conference. So let's make this world a better place, one phone call, one email, one discussion, one policy at a time. Thank you.